Here's a real quick example of modified internal rate of return, and net present value. If you take a look at this, we have two firms, both with exactly the same cash flows. See, $21 and thousands. So 21 million is required as the initial investment today, and then we've got a steady stream of cash flows of $6 million per year for 5 years. And the reason I put this one together is I want to show what happens comparing internal rate of return to modified internal rate of return when we use different weighted average cost of capital or different discount rates. So with IRR, we simply type in IRR and then highlight the range, right? And we get 13.2%. Now here I'll do it again, only this time I'm going to click on the formula bar so you can see how that will work. So let me type in equal IRR left paren, then I hit the little f's of x, insert function, and I will get a little screen like this. And I know you can't see all of that. And then I click where I want the values to go. That's here. I can bring it down, and then I have to give it a guess, and I'll give it a guess as being the cost of capital. Okay, and I hit OK. Also over here I skipped the guess, but technically I should be putting in that guess right there, so I'll add it. So 13.2 and 13.2, and we would expect that because the internal rate of return only uses the guess to make sure it's at a local area within that linear function, because that's really what it produces. Okay, or excuse me, not a linear function, but a polynomial function, and the guess makes sure we're in the correct area of that function. It's probably more technical than what we need to be concerned with, but the point of it is the internal rate of return looks at that range and comes up with the value. So if you will, it ignores the cost of capital and determines its own it determines its own interest rate, and that interest rate is that rate that exactly equals a net present value of 0 given the cash flows. All right, but with modified internal rate of return, we go equal MIRR left paren, and then we put in the values. We put in that range. We put a comma. And the finance rate is the firm's cost of capital, which would also be the investment range. So we put it in twice. And now we get 12.2%. Now I'll copy that one over here and we get 14. And this is really the point of this quick demonstration, which is if the firm has a lower cost of capital and the internal rate of return is higher, if the reinvestment rate is lower than the internal rate of return, then it will drive down the rate when we use the modified internal rate of return. Now we get the opposite effect. If the internal rate of return comes out to be lower than the cost of capital, because the reinvestment amounts go in at a higher rate than the internal rate of return, which will drive up the modified internal rate of return. So we can see in this case it's higher than the internal rate of return, and with firm A it's lower. And then just as a last comparative, we'll put in the NPV, 11% rate, and then the values, remember, end of year 1 to end of year 5, right? And then you need to add in the negative amount that takes place now. Okay? And so what we show is exactly what we would expect. If the internal rate of return is higher than the cost of capital, right, we would get a positive net present value, and here it's $1,175,000. In this case, the internal rate of return is lower than the cost of capital, so we would expect the NPV to be 0. Okay, I hope you found that beneficial.